sponsors.
This is Tanoa Lynn Poirier, and I want to welcome you to Community Conversations on WNN 95.3 FM and 1470 AM. This show is about you. I want to hear your trials and triumphs, challenges and victories, and how you overcome obstacles every day in our dynamic industry. All callers are welcome to join Community Conversations. This is where we'll discuss all things in common. We'll discuss managers, directors, vendors, and owners. Let's elevate the conversation. Raise the bar. Start here, now. Welcome in Community Conversations with Tanoa. I have a really special treat for you today. But first I want to say thank you to my team. You guys are amazing. Thank you for helping me do what I want to do by doing the show. And all you've done all week, it's been a really challenging month for us. You know what I'm talking about. So thank you for helping me on this journey. I'm crazy about all of you. I want to remind you that you can call in. The number is 888-565-1470, 888-565-1470. And I've got a treat for you today. My buddy Chris Eden is joining us today. Chris, yay!
Thank you.
Chris and I met on a big project at one of my communities, and I'm going to let him introduce himself and his company. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having me.
Tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm Chris Eden. I work with a company called Epic Forensics and Engineering, a specialty engineering firm out of Lake Worth, Florida. We specialize in structural, civil, mechanical, electrical, all the disciplines in our office. And we specialize in dealing with associations. So I'm happy to be here.
So this segment, actually this episode is about, it was based on a blog I wrote, encouraging managers to encourage the board to consult an expert. And why that's important is because, and you know what I'm talking about, managers, is that a lot of times boards want to save money by asking you to give an opinion on a legal matter, on an engineering, English this time, engineering matter, structural, painting project, roofing. Well, just get the maintenance guys to go up there and take a look. Please don't do that because you're not qualified. So I just want to say, if that is happening to you, have the courage to say, that is not my area of expertise. I would be happy to find you somebody or three somebodies in order to give you a proposal to perform that service. But if you are practicing law without a license, you're going to get yourself in trouble. If you're giving engineering, plumbing, electrical, or engineering advice, you're going to get yourself in trouble. So please have the courage to say no, and here's why. So one of the things that we talked about when we were working together is how consulting an expert actually saves associations money.
Absolutely. It goes back to we've experienced this for many years. So sometimes the problems come up that we can see in advance.
Right.
A lot of associations look at the fees and they say, hey, this is very expensive. However, the overall project scope helps. And, you know, that consultant comes in and saves a lot of money.
They do. They sorry to interrupt. They save a lot of money because they can see things that the manager, acting as a property manager, cannot see. We're not qualified to look at them. We don't have Chris's level of expertise. Chris is by education a civil engineer, yes?
Yes.
And he's a building inspector. He's understands structural components. And in the community where he was assisting me with one project, 3 or 4 other projects came up. Remember, we had some water intrusion, and we had some spalling on a concrete balcony, and we had a structural problem in one of the units that was attached to a garage. And so I can look at it and say, okay, that looks like a problem to me. And he's like, yes, that's a problem. And so he analyzes that from his area of expertise.
Absolutely.
Yes.
That's huge. Right now we're working on a huge construction restoration project in Aventura. And that's exactly right. Problems come up throughout a project that managers are not familiar with and they're not expecting.
Right.
And we can help with that.
In addition to helping as the engineer, you can work as kind of the liaison between a contractor
Yes.
and the manager.
Yes.
So in other words, an association would hire a firm like Chris's, like Epic Forensics
Epic
and
Forensics.
Engineering.
Yes,
Epic
yes.
Forensics. And they would act as kind of an objective party on behalf of the association, making sure that the contractor is
Not
building according
overcharging.
to specs,
Yes,
right?
building according to specs, following plan, not overcharging, and being able to give advice to the association from the contractor's point of view, but also making sure that everything goes according to plan and by code. That's very, very important.
So when you are asking your board to consider hiring an expert for a major project, if they are investing $2, $3, $4, $500,000 in a project, and there is a fee associated with having an engineer making sure the project gets done properly, on time, on budget, and finding things that you would never be able to see because you're not qualified to notice these kinds of things. I'm going to give you an example. We had a situation in one of our communities where we were having a elevator conveyance built, and one of the technicians drilled a few dozen times into the structural column. Now, there happened to be somebody on site, actually happened to have been my husband, who's also a CAM and a general contractor, who found this. So then we called the engineer, and we didn't know whether we were going to have to close the building down. Are we condemned? What are we doing?
Exactly.
But without having another eye, write the specs, correct the vendor. Yes, there was a fee associated with that, but what is the investment of the community? What is the investment value of that building? So you have a $25 million
Yes.
value. It costs you a few $1,000s to get an expert advice.
Yes.
Does that not make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. And it's very surprising sometimes that most community managers, they try to really push it through the maintenance department. They're maintenance guys. And unfortunately, sometimes it cannot work.
Yeah.
Also, there's micromanaging when the project comes on board. They said, hey, what about this? What about this? How do we do this? And how's that working? Well, what we try to do is, at our firm, Epic, we try to leave a maintenance manual. This is what was done on
Yes.
the project. These are the materials we use.
Right.
So later
That's
on,
true.
when you're doing the repairs, you can use those same materials. I cannot tell you how many times we've seen
Right.
a certain set of caulking used on a certain window, and 5 years later, there's a different type of caulking that's used.
Right.
So that is huge to be able to have a really an expert that can help you, guide you through that process, but also leave a maintenance manual for you to continue repairing your building and upkeeping your building in the future.
Well, he's correct about the maintenance manual. And pardon me, in one of the projects that we worked on together, he left that maintenance manual. And why that is important is because if I am not the on-site manager in 5 years, the next manager or
Yes,
management company
absolutely.
has
Yes.
this resource, because now a lot of things are in my head,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So I can just kind of go into this computer here and say, no, this is what we did. This is the caulk we used. This is the Vulcan we used. This is the Sika product
Yes.
or GAF product or whatever it is. But that's in my head.
A perfect example is like your project. We use a certain paint, Benjamin Moore Ultra Spec. So
Right.
what happens is that now the person unfortunately, let's say you get up and leave. You're not
Right.
there. What paint did we use?
Right.
What color did we use?
Right.
And that paint what type of characteristics did that paint have? So that's very, very important. That can be all in the maintenance manual. Most managers don't even consider it.
It is really important. It's vital that you, as much as you value the contribution of your maintenance men, and mine are fantastic, they are not engineers. They're not electricians. They're not plumbers. They're not trained or educated to do what Chris can do. So when you're having the conversation with your board, you're basically going to say, here's why this makes sense. And you have to make them understand why consulting an expert makes sense. And this is in your best interest because they have a fiduciary responsibility
That is true.
to the community to make sure they've done everything they can to facilitate the best outcome, right? So when you tell them that way, they'll be more inclined to accept it, although it does ramp up the cost slightly to the project. But the expense benefit ratio is enormously positive.
Yes.
Would you agree?
I agree 100%. As a matter of fact, I would encourage to bring in the expert during the during the phase of you deciding on what scope of what project is going on. Don't just wait till you decide on a project. Bring them in. Maybe there's alternatives. Maybe there's other ways we can save.
That's a good point.
And just bring them in earlier as you can, because like you said, we are the experts to be able to do that.
So I'm going to throw a line out here. What kind of managers are your favorite managers to work with? Now, I just mean that in terms of, I know certainly an experienced manager is. Are you happier working in a vertical community, condos, or HOAs, or is it kind of the temperament of the manager that you work best with?
Good question. At our firm, we do a lot of 558s, property turnovers. We have managers that we've have great relationships with for many, many years, and a lot of them just says, "Hey, what do I do at this point?" That's where we like to start. We have some managers that have been contractors, or some managers that have said, "Hey, I'm a lawyer," and they just want to be able to put their fingerprint on the project.
Right.
Unfortunately, it conflicts with our advice,
right?
Because they've done it a certain way, but codes have changed, things are being updated, certain products have come out. Brands like Sika and Benjamin Moore and Sherwin-Williams, those guys. Every month there's a new product. Every 6 months there's something new. Right. Codes are changing every 3 years, so things are different. But managers that are saying, "Hey, where do I go? What do I do? And how can I save money?" Those are the best managers that we can have.
That's a perfect answer, and I think that's correct. Where do we go? What do we need to do? And how can we get the best value for the money for the job that we need to do? And that is our responsibility as managers to make sure that they don't always go for the lowest bid.
Yes.
Because sometimes the lowest bid, you're not getting the value,
yes,
right?
Absolutely.
But making sure that engineers like Chris also help you with the specifications when you're doing a closed bid process, so that it's apples to apples comparisons when you're doing this jobs, right?
That is so important.
So that when they all come back and we crack open the bids, that we are not necessarily influenced by people we like, because we always like to work with people whom we've worked with before, that we're familiar with, and that we've had a good experience. But maybe they're not the best person for the job. And so now if we go through this process, we'll say, give us the best people who have performed this job with the manufacturer's blessing, because a lot of times manufacturers will say, these people consistently give us a good product, right?
Warranty.
So it's always attached to a warranty.
Yes.
So when a manufacturer, I don't know, like a GAF or a Sika or somebody like that says, these are the top 5, and then you would say, well, maybe let's just talk to the top 3 if the project is associated with that manufacturer, then we would sort of send the bids out and then have a conversation with them.
I'll give you a perfect example. Some contractors we've worked with, we've had a great experience, but however, every project is different. Mm-hmm. But in the contracting business, sometimes they put a lot of the charges in, mobilization and demobilization, let's say. Right. So what we do at our firm is we bring in all the bids and we compare them and we see where those bids line up. All the line items line up properly to make sure that you're getting, like you said, apples to apples and oranges to oranges for this specific project. And we would just give you a suggestion. The board would make the final decision. But we will give you that professional analysis and saying, hey, this is where this guy's low. This is where this guy's high. Take a look here. This doesn't seem right. This is not standard. And that helps.
And sometimes even when we crack open the bids and we're looking at on paper, we can see the prices, but then you come in and have kind of a meeting with the folks that have given you a bid.
Yes.
And sometimes there's just a synergy there, even if they're not. You just understand that they're asking questions like, not to be indelicate, but where do the portable bathrooms go? We want to make sure that that's screened properly. Yes. What is your feeling about mobilization for transportation, right? Yes. So MOT, where people are used to going in one way and out another, their lives are going to be turned upside down.
Completely.
Sensitivity from the contractor to those kinds of things as a manager make me say, okay, this person is sensitive to the needs of the owners.
Yes.
When they'll ask about, what is the age range in terms of the demographics. So how inconvenienced are the older people going to be? Maybe
Correct.
if they're
Correct.
if it's an elevator issue, if it's a parking issue, can we make their parking space a little closer and trade with somebody? All of those questions make me think, well, this person
cares. And experience. How late? How early can you start?
Right.
You know, when do you stop?
Right.
How loud is it going to be?
Right.
I mean, that's in a restoration job. It's huge because the vibration. You could be far in the far end, but the vibration from the chipping hammers can vibrate all the way through, but it'll be on the other end. And it's those contractors are the ones that you want to pay close attention to. I agree.
Absolutely. So in that bid meeting, you would look at all of the bids apples to apples, but the personal meeting you have with them determines often whom you're going to go with and whom you're going to recommend to the board.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And oftentimes the prices are very similar.
Right.
Because they are pricing apples to apples, and they're familiar with the products.
We are familiar.
Absolutely.
We know where the standards lie. But like I said, it's very important to bring in the expert, whether it be a plumbing guy, whoever it is, bring that expert in during your decision process. That's the key.
Right.
Because they can help you get you through that difficult stage of making the decision. Also, there's some board members that may be outspoken, but the expert can say, hey, wait a minute. This is the way we've normally done it. And this is, as you know.
Yes.
As you
I know. We had that experience.
Yes.
So this is something I sprung on Chris when he came to do, and you're going to remember this. Do you recall? There was kind of the owners were a little bit up in arms about kind of their life was going to change dramatically for this project, which we were going to do together. And so I asked if you would meet them at the pool. Kind of the first day I met you, I'm like, how do you feel about
meeting you at the pool? Having a Q&A.
Having a Q&A right now on the spot.
Yes.
But he was completely game. He was flawless. They asked lots of questions.
Yes.
And they were satisfied once their questions were answered. And here's, at the end of the day, what I always say, this is about people.
Yes.
The construction
Absolutely.
is to preserve the property that houses people.
Absolutely.
We want to make sure that we are doing things in terms of rerouting their method of transportation, where we put the porta potties, when we start the project and when it needs to stop, because people live there.
Absolutely.
Right?
It's very important, like you said. And that's, I hate to harp on it, but that's the topic, expert. A perfect example. If you're doing a construction project and you cannot get out on your balcony, the balconies are closed.
Right.
But on the weekend, no one's working. Mm-hmm. Can we open the balcony up so I can get out there and enjoy it? These are the things that the association struggle with, and the expert can come in and says, this is the reason why. It's a safety concern. It's an issue with code. The contractors can't, the liability insurance, et cetera, a lot of things. But the expert helps you, the association, with that, because you're going to get those complaints from your residents.
In addition, when you're in the board meeting, your expert can do the talking. So a lot of times in board meetings that I have, there are lots of questions which are technical in nature.
Yes.
And you don't have to agree, but I know I'm better than average knowledge base of construction principles.
Come on, Lynn. You're married to a contractor.
I might be a little better than most.
You are more.
Right?
You are,
However, that is not my expertise.
Yes.
So it comes out of my mouth. They're going to, they're going to take that kind of as the truth.
Yes.
And I may be getting it wrong. I may be understanding it imperfectly, even though in my head I understand exactly what you're saying. Getting your expert to have that conversation with the board is the best policy, because you don't want to get yourself caught up in giving bad advice, because they're going to count on you.
Absolutely.
So don't do that. And I would say that for town halls, for big projects, let your expert talk to the owners. They have concerns, they have fears.
Yes.
How's it going to affect me? My daughter's getting married. I was going to have them get married on the balcony as a backdrop. We were going to do pictures. Well, that's not going to happen.
The dust. The dust is in my apartment. How do I get it out?
Right.
What happens? And so, I will give you, not to interrupt, Lynn, I'll give you one huge issue, one point that it's really thought about, especially living in South Florida. And that's construction during the hurricane season. Okay? So here your balcony's opened
Absolutely.
up and your sliding glass doors are off. And these guys are working. And then the storm's approaching in 5 days. What do you do? Who handles that? How does it get handled? Once again, the expert will see that in advance and say to the contractor, this is what we do. This are the specs. Just to make sure that this is done right. These are the fasteners we use. This is the spacing on the studs. So those are the things that are very important. It's just a limited amount of things among the things that can happen.
That is a perfect example because in Florida, of course, we're in hurricane season,
Yes.
and it's at top of mind.
Yes.
Beginning June 1st, we're all
Yes,
thinking, "Oh
absolutely.
Lord, it's hurricane season again," and that we have to make sure that if we're starting projects, that we're going to be able to. And we actually
Secure the
we
site,
went
yeah.
through a thing.
A little bit of thing,
We
yes.
did. Now that I'm
Yes.
thinking about it,
Yeah.
we did.
We covered
and it
up,
was,
we made sure.
we
Yeah.
made sure that everything was off the roofs.
Correct.
Remember?
Yep.
And it happened to be a roof-related deal, and so all of the supplies needed to come off, all of the tools and materials, et cetera, needed to be taken off and secured.
The swing
Now,
stages.
for the swing stages, which
Yes.
is an enormous
Yes.
deal.
Yes.
So they had to demobilize,
Exactly.
and then remobilize, right?
Yes.
And that's just kind of factored into. That's one of those to be determined cost because you can't, you know that you're in hurricane season, but you can't anticipate actually that happening.
No.
This particular hurricane just jogged left and missed us and gave us quite a nice drink.
Yes.
But that was a trip.
But there you
Can I
go.
just say, that was a trip. So that is an excellent point. And I had almost forgotten about that. Does your contractor or your expert or your liaison as the engineer come back and make sure that the contractor has done everything they are supposed to do to secure the property that you're responsible for? Because in those last few hours, it is bedlam, right?
Yes, absolutely.
It's insane. People are scared. They have not properly prepared, so you're trying to assist them at the very last minute. And
Yes.
then if you have somebody like Chris working with you, then you can let them work with the contractor so that that's one less thing off your plate, right?
Once again, the expert sees this in advance during the contract phase or the bidding phase. Say, hey, what's your allowance for this,
Right.
and who pays for it?
Yes.
That it can be very costly.
Right.
It's so one of those things is, and especially in South Florida, that's a typical
Yes.
issue in South Florida.
Right.
But once again, there's a board member that lives in New York or Northeast, and they come
Always.
down and they forgot. Okay,
Right.
we have a hurricane here. Oh, so my point is, we're gonna harp on it, but the expert is key.
Expert
Yes,
is key.
yes,
And so
absolutely.
the title of this episode is encourage boards to consult an expert.
Yes.
Don't allow them to ask you to have your maintenance guys go on the roof to analyze the elevator, to analyze a plumbing problem, because water is our enemy in Florida. I think with everybody, but in Florida in particular, we're close to the water. There's a lot of erosion that happens in proximity to salt water.
Absolutely.
People who live in vertical communities, your floor is somebody's ceiling. So you have to make sure that if there's an issue, that you can consult an engineer about what is this? Is this association responsibility or is this owner responsibility? Because sometimes it's not clear.
Yes.
Correct?
And also the repair.
Right.
The repair materials you're using. That to me, I see that a lot. You go on projects sometimes and you start ripping it apart. You're noticing repairs that the community made, 4, 5, 6 years ago, and they're Home Depot products.
Right.
On a multi-million-dollar building.
Right.
It's unfortunate, but you see those things. But if you have an expert and you can consult the expert, then those type of situations do not occur. They do not occur at all.
So, Chris, remind people where you are from
great.
and your number.
Epic Forensics and Engineering. Our numbers are 561-472-1391. You can call us for advice. You can give us a call. I mean, we have a lot of projects going on in South Florida, throughout South Florida, all the way from Jupiter, South Beach, and I will personally take your call if you guys want to call and just ask a question. A lot
Just
of
say,
times,
I need to talk to Chris
yes,
right now.
exactly. If there's an issue that you're a resident and there's some contracting going on and you're not too clear about it, give us a call. Or if you're a board member or even like Lynn, a community manager, we would love to be able to talk to you and hopefully give you some advice, and hopefully in the future you can acquire our services.
And if you want to call the show, it's 888-565-1470,
We'll take some questions.
888-565-1470, or just share an experience you've had and maybe get some advice from our expert. One of the things that's really great when you're on site is that there are other problems that come up that you didn't anticipate in the process of a project, right?
Yes.
So
That's always
Right.
I mean, there's
Yeah.
that's what's called a construction project.
right. But not just the project that you're working on. There's an issue, on the balcony of somebody that is their responsibility.
Yes.
But you're on site, so can you come and take a look at it? Now, a lot of times that's the owner's responsibility, but you can say this owner would like you to take a look at a problem because she needs some advice, right? And so while you're on site, it's really helpful when someone like you is in close proximity, and you can go and say, well, Mr. or Mrs. Jones, here's the problem. Here's what I recommend.
Absolutely, that happened. I mean, that happened. We're doing the balcony stuff, and your awnings. You need to replace the awnings. And
Right.
what do you do? How do you do it? That's the best time to consult as a resident. It's there. You should use the association engineer or the expert, and I would encourage that completely. Don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid, and don't worry about the money. The money you will actually save money if you encourage your association to consult an expert. So, just to recap, someone like Chris can assist you with communication with your board at the beginning of the process when you are considering a project, with specifications, with getting vendors for closed bids, and ultimately help your board with their fiduciary responsibility and help you be a better manager. It has been my pleasure to have Chris as my guest today.
Oh, wow.
It goes so
It's
fast, doesn't it?
Unbelievable.
I told you it would go so fast. I hope you
Unbelievable.
found this topic interesting. Thank you for joining us. Join me
you.
next week for another great
Thank you.
episode. Be a blessing to somebody. Thank you.
Thank you.
You have been listening to Community Conversations with Tanoa Lynn Poirier. It is my honor to host this program, and I appreciate you listening. We have an exciting show planned for you next week, so mark your calendars and join me every Friday at 5 p.m. on WNN 95.3 FM and 1470 AM. We look forward to hearing from you, our listeners. It's all about learning, sharing, and teaching. We're all in this together. Until next time, be a blessing to someone and endeavor to persevere.
The opinions expressed on the